The fall was endless, a symphony of snapping branches and tearing fabric, ending with a sickening thud that stole her breath. Elara's world fractured into a kaleidoscope of pain and the metallic tang of blood in her mouth. She lay in the cold embrace of the ravine floor, amidst the tangled roots and damp earth, listening to the hurried footsteps fading above. Their laughter, a cruel echo, vibrated through the raw gashes on her skin and the deeper wounds in her soul. They had left her for dead, a broken doll discarded in the wilderness, believing the darkness would consume her. But the darkness was just beginning. The first sensation was the biting cold, a relentless enemy that seeped into her bones. Her clothes were shredded, offering little protection against the late autumn chill. Every muscle screamed in protest as she tried to move, a dull, agonizing throb radiating from her ribs and head. Her eyes, swollen and crusted, slowly opened to a world of blurry shapes and indistinct shadows. The smell of damp soil, decaying leaves, and something else, something sickly sweet and metallic, filled her nostrils. Her own blood. She tried to cry out, but only a dry, rasping gasp escaped her lips. Hours blurred into an eternity. The moon, a sliver of bone-white light, crept across the narrow strip of sky visible from the ravine. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of terror through her battered body. She was prey, helpless and exposed. Yet beneath the terror, a spark ignited, a cold, hard ember that refused to be extinguished. It wasn't hope. It was something far more primal, far more dangerous. It was fury. She had to move. The thought was a relentless hammer against her throbbing skull. Inch by agonizing inch, she dragged herself through the muck, her fingers scrabbling at loose rocks and thorny bushes. Each movement sent a fresh wave of agony, but the thought of their faces, their sneering smiles, their careless cruelty fueled her. She found a jagged piece of shale, sharp enough to cut, and clutched it like a lifeline. It wasn't a weapon yet, but it was a promise. Days turned into a torturous blur of survival. She drank from muddy puddles, the water tasting of earth and desperation. She gnawed on roots, her stomach churning, but the hunger was a dull ache compared to the burning fire in her gut. She learned to move with the silence of a wounded animal, avoiding the harsh sunlight, conserving every ounce of strength. The ravine became her teacher, her prison, and her sanctuary. It stripped away everything she was, leaving behind a raw, primal core. Her once soft hands were now calloused, her nails broken, her skin a mosaic of cuts and bruises. Her reflection in a stagnant pool showed a stranger, gaunt, wild-eyed, but with an unyielding steel in her gaze. The first time she saw a human after her ordeal, it was a lone hiker on a distant ridge, a tiny speck against the vast indifference of the sky. She felt a flicker of something she couldn't name, fear, yearning, or perhaps just a reminder of the world she had lost. But the thought was fleeting. Her purpose was clear, etched into her very bones by the cold earth of the ravine. She wasn't just surviving, she was being reborn. When she finally found a path, a barely visible trail winding its way up the sheer rock face, it took her an entire night to scale it. Her muscles screamed, her fingers bled, but she climbed, driven by an almost supernatural resolve. As she pulled herself over the last ledge, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. She stood at the edge of the world, looking down at the sleeping town in the valley below. The town where they lived. The town where they thought she was gone forever. A single tear, cold and bitter, traced a path through the grime on her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, nor of relief. It was a tear of recognition. The old Elara was dead, buried in the ravine. A new self had emerged, forged in agony and fueled by an infernal purpose. She was no longer a victim. She was the storm, and the storm was coming home.
The town was a grid of flickering amber lights, a deceptive nest of normalcy that smelled of wood smoke and rain-slicked asphalt. They were there, sleeping, breathing the same air she was now reclaiming. Elara moved through the outskirts like a predatory shadow, her silhouette thin, jagged, and unrecognizable. She didn't head for the main streets. She sought the peripheral darkness, the places where the light didn't reach. She reached her old apartment building, a drab brick structure that felt like a relic from a previous life. That woman, the one who lived here before the ravine, she's gone. Elara didn't use the front door. She knew the loose latch on the basement window, a flaw she had once complained about, now a gift from her former self. Inside, the air was stale, frozen in time. She stood in her own kitchen, her scarred fingers brushing the laminate counter. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to. Every corner was etched into her mind. She found what she came for in the back of the utility closet, a heavy canvas tool roll and a hunting knife her father had given her for protection. Protection, what a hollow word. She cleaned herself in the dark, the freezing water hitting her raw skin like needles of ice. She didn't flinch. The pain was a tether, a reminder of the death that had to be collected. She dressed in dark, heavy layers, concealing the map of scars that now defined her. As she looked into the cracked bathroom mirror, she didn't see a victim. She saw a countdown. The first name on her list was Miller. Miller, the one with the loud laugh and the weak eyes. He lived in a trailer on the edge of the woods, a place that smelled of sour beer and stagnant intent. Elara approached the thin metal walls, hearing the low drone of a television from within. She waited, letting the cold settle into her joints. She waited until the lights went out. She waited until the world was silent enough to hear his rhythmic, oblivious snoring. The lock on the trailer door was a joke, a thin click, and the interior opened up like a wound. She moved through the cramped space, the floorboards groaning under her ghost-light weight. She stood over his bed, his smell, that same suffocating scent of cheap tobacco. It triggered a wave of nausea that she instantly crushed with a wall of iron. She didn't use the knife, not yet. She reached out and placed a single, wet clump of moss from the ravine onto his chest. Then she leaned close to his ear, her breath cold against his skin. "The earth in the ravine is very deep, Miller, but it wasn't deep enough." He bolted upright, a frantic, confused sound dying in his throat as he felt the cold steel of the knife pressed against the soft underside of his jaw. The moonlight caught the edge of the blade, and for a second, just one perfect second, he saw her eyes. "Don't scream. Screaming is for the living, and we both know you're already a ghost." He tried to scramble back, his hands fumbling against the sheets, but she was a part of the darkness now, inseparable and inescapable. She watched the realization dawn on him, the way his pupils dilated with a terror that mirrored her own on that final night. "Please," he whimpered, the word a pathetic vibration against the steel. "Please, that's a funny word, Miller. I said it 100 times, and you never once understood the definition." She didn't kill him, not tonight. Death was too quick, a mercy he didn't deserve. Instead, she leaned in and made a single, precise, shallow cut across his cheek, a mark, a brand. Tonight, you sleep with the lights on. Tomorrow, you'll wish you hadn't woken up at all. Tell the others. Tell them the ravine has come back to say hello. She vanished before he could find his voice, slipping out into the rainy night as the first scream finally broke the silence of the trailer park. 1 down, 2 to go. The hunt had officially begun.
The news of Miller's accident didn't make the headlines. Not yet. In a town like this, a scream in a trailer park is just background noise. But for those who were there that night, the silence that followed was louder than any siren. They knew. They could feel the shift in the air, the way the shadows in the corners of their rooms seemed to grow teeth. The second name on the list was Seth. Seth, the golden boy of the valley, the one with the expensive truck and the father on the city council. He wasn't a coward like Miller. He was a predator who hid behind a smile and a bank account. But even predators start to sweat when the lights flicker. Elara didn't go to his house, not yet. She went to the woods behind his family's estate, a place of manicured trails and artificial beauty. She spent the day in the canopy, a ghost in the leaves, watching him through the scope of a stolen pair of binoculars. She watched him pace the length of his balcony, a glass of amber liquid trembling in his hand. He was hunting for her, peering into the tree line, clutching a pistol like it could protect him from a memory. "Look closer, Seth. I'm the breath on the back of your neck." As the sun began its slow, agonizing descent, bleeding crimson across the horizon, Elara began her work. She didn't need to break in. She needed to break him. She started with the perimeter lights, a simple snip of the wires, and the estate was plunged into a prehistoric dark. She heard his shout from the balcony, the frantic clicking of a flashlight. He was blind now, and in the dark, the ravine is everywhere. She moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, bypassing the security cameras she had already disabled. She entered through the mudroom, the smell of expensive leather and floor wax, a sharp contrast to the rot she had lived in for weeks. She didn't head for him. She headed for his sanctuary, his private study. She left his phone on the desk, the screen glowing with a single image, a photo of the ravine taken from the exact spot where he had pushed her. Next to it, she placed a small, jagged piece of his own truck's taillight, the one she had smashed 3 nights ago. Then, she waited in the crawl space above the ceiling, listening to the heavy thud of his boots as he ran into the room. She could hear his breath, ragged, panicked. She could hear the safety click off on his gun. Is that gun for me, Seth, or is it to stop the shaking? The sound of her voice, seemingly coming from the walls themselves, sent him spinning in circles. He fired a shot into the darkness, the roar of the weapon deafening in the small room. The bullet hit a bookshelf, sending a spray of paper and wood into the air. Missed. Pause. You always were a bad shot when the target could look you in the eye. He began to scream, a raw, ugly sound that stripped away the golden boy facade. He cursed her name, he begged, he threatened. Elara sat in the dark above him, her face a mask of stone. She felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. Every tremor in his voice was a brick removed from the wall of his arrogance. She triggered the next part of her plan,
a pre-recorded loop of the sound from that night, the wind, the rain, and the specific, rhythmic thud of a body hitting branches. She played it through his own high-end audio system, the bass vibrating the very floor he stood on. "Stop it!" he shrieked, collapsing to his knees. "She's dead! You're dead!" "Dead is just a word, Seth. I'm something much worse now. I'm the consequence." She dropped from the ceiling hatch behind him, silent as a falling leaf. He didn't even hear her land. She didn't use the knife. She used a heavy iron fire poker she had grabbed from the hearth. The first blow took him in the back of the knees. He went down with a sickening crack. He tried to turn, to point the gun, but she stepped on his wrist, the bones snapping under her boot like the dry kindling. The pistol clattered across the hardwood floor. She knelt over him, the moonlight from the window finally illuminating her face. He gasped, his eyes wide with a soul-deep horror. He saw the scars. He saw the emptiness where Elara used to be. "Do you remember the sound the dirt made when you threw me on me?" Pause. It sounded like silence. "I've brought some for you." She didn't finish him. She didn't want the police, not yet. She leaned in, her face inches from his. "The third one, the leader, where is he hiding?" Seth blurted out the name, the location, the words tumbling out of him in a desperate attempt to buy a second of mercy. He gave him everything. He betrayed his brother in a heartbeat. "Thank you, Seth. Now, pause. Sleep. The ravine is waiting for its second guest." She struck him once more, a precise blow to the temple, knocking him into a deep, dark unconsciousness. As she walked out of the mansion, leaving the broken golden boy in the middle of his ruined sanctuary, the rain began to fall again. One left, the architect, the one who watched, the one who smiled the widest. Elara looked at her hands. They weren't shaking, not even a little.
Seth's whimpers faded into the rain-swept darkness behind her. Elara didn't look back. There was no room for sentiment, no time for hesitation. The architect, the one who orchestrated it all, the one who watched her fall, his eyes devoid of mercy. His name was Thomas, and he was the last. According to Seth's blubbering confessions, Thomas was hiding in an old hunting lodge deep in the northern woods, a forgotten cabin his family owned. A place far from the neon glow of the city, where screams carried no further than the trees. His sanctuary, her final stage. The drive was long, the winding roads slick with rain, mirroring the twisted path her life had taken. She drove a stolen car, a dark silhouette against the pre-dawn gloom. Her mind was a tactical map, every detail from Seth's fear-induced ramblings meticulously placed. Thomas was arrogant, but he was also paranoid. He would be armed, he would be waiting, but he wouldn't be expecting her. She abandoned the car miles from the lodge, deep in the thick pine forest. The air here was different, cleaner, colder, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. A stark contrast to the metallic tang of blood and fear that clung to her memory. Here, the shadows were deeper, the silence more profound. Her kind of hunting ground. The lodge appeared through a break in the trees, a dark hulking shape against the bruised sky. It was old, built of heavy logs, with a single plume of smoke curling lazily from the chimney. He was there, warm, comfortable, delusional. She didn't approach directly.
She circled the cabin, a silent wraith, noting the security lights, the poorly placed cameras, the fresh tire tracks. He was prepared for an assault, but not for infiltration. He expected a charge. I bring a siege. She found a weak point in the old woodshed connected to the main cabin. The padlock was rusted, a symbol of forgotten security. A quick, brutal kick, and the flimsy door burst open. Inside, rows of chopped firewood, the scent of sawdust heavy in the air, and a narrow, forgotten crawl space leading into the cabin's foundation. The crawl was long and tortuous, the damp earth cold against her face, the smell of mildew and rot filling her nostrils. It reminded her of the ravine, but this time she was moving towards the predator, not away from it. Every inch was a step closer to settling the score. She emerged into the cellar, a dim, dusty space filled with forgotten boxes and the hum of an old generator. The main floor was above her. She could hear his footsteps, heavy and agitated, pacing back and forth. He was on edge. Good. She found the access panel, a loose plank in the floorboards. She pushed it up slowly, soundlessly, her eyes scanning the room above. A rustic living area, a stone fireplace, hunting trophies adorning the walls. And Thomas, standing by the window, a hunting rifle clutched in his hands, staring out into the empty woods. Pause. He was there, warm, comfortable, delusional. Found you, Thomas. The floorboards creaked. Thomas spun, his rifle raising instantly, but she was already moving. She didn't leap out, she slid, a low blur of motion, grabbing a discarded axe from beside the fireplace. He fired. The bullet splintered the wall where she had been a millisecond before. Elara threw the axe. It spun end over end, not aiming for his head, but for his weapon. The axe blade struck the rifle stock with a sickening crack, tearing it from his grasp. The rifle clattered to the floor, useless. Thomas stared at her, his face draining of color, the arrogance replaced with pure, unadulterated fear. He finally saw her, not a victim, not a memory, the embodiment of his worst nightmare. "Elara, no!" he stammered, backing away, his eyes wide with a terror that brought a chilling satisfaction to her soul. "You're dead. I saw you." "You saw what you wanted to see, Thomas. Now see this." She advanced slowly, picking up a heavy, steel-tipped spear that hung as a decoration above the fireplace. The weight felt natural in her hands. She stalked him, cornering him against the rough-hewn wall. His fear was palpable, a raw scent in the air. "Please, I'll give you anything," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Money can't buy back what you took. It can only pay the price." She didn't use the spear to kill him immediately. She used it to pin him against the wall, the sharp tip just inches from his throat, drawing a thin line of blood. He whimpered, his eyes fixed on hers, searching for any flicker of the girl he once knew. There was none, only the ravine. "Do you remember the look in my eyes, Thomas? When you looked down into that ravine, it was confusion, it was pain, it was disbelief." She pressed the spear tip slightly harder, just enough to make him gasp. "Now, look into mine." He saw his own terror reflected back. He saw the cold, unyielding resolve that had been forged in the very hell he had cast her into. He saw justice, he saw vengeance, and he saw his end. She released the spear, letting it fall with a clang that echoed in the silent cabin. Thomas slid to the floor, panting, believing it was over. But she wasn't done.
Death was too kind. She picked up the hunting rifle he had dropped, its stock broken, but the barrel still intact. The woods are full of sounds, Thomas, and sometimes the silence is the loudest scream of all. She didn't kill him with the rifle. She used it to dismantle his life. She systematically destroyed everything in the cabin, the hunting trophies, the expensive electronics, the furniture. With each shattered object, a piece of his constructed reality crumbled. And as she worked, she described to him in chilling detail how she had survived, how she had clawed her way back, how every moment of her agony had been channeled into this one singular purpose. You thought I buried you, but you just planted a seed. By the time the sun fully rose, casting long, accusing shadows through the broken windows, Thomas was a broken man, not physically, but spiritually. He sat huddled in the corner, staring at the ruin of his life, his eyes vacant, his mind shattered by the terror and the meticulous deconstruction of his world. He would live, but he would never truly be alive again. He was a husk, a monument to a vengeance more profound than death itself. Elara walked out of the lodge, leaving the architect of her suffering to the silence of his ruined sanctuary. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp and clean. She felt no triumph, no joy, only a vast, echoing emptiness. The debt was paid. The score was settled. But as she stepped into the new dawn, she realized something chilling. The ravine had indeed birthed a new self, and that self now needed a new purpose. The hunt was over, but the hunter remained.